Hello, hello, welcome back. In this series of videos, we're looking at some very, very deep questions. Oh yeah, we've looked at some really deep existential who am I style of questions. And then we also have questions that touch on our motivation on the path. And today's is one of those. And is it, do you want love truly? Do you truly want love? Do you truly want awakening? Do you truly want to have the permanent experience and return home, permanent experience of your oneness with God? Do you truly want this? You may say that you do. Do you truly? We have a question today that's designed to get us to think about that and to want it truly. If you've been through the workbook for students here in A Course in Miracles, you'll remember that one of the lessons, one of the ideas that we practice and work on is, I want the peace of God. Yes, we're invited to want the peace of God and nothing else. So do you want love truly? We're told here in this particular passage of the text, it's chapter 4, section 3, love and conflict. So in paragraph 4 here, it's said that Jesus tells us that love will enter into our mind, fully and completely enter into our mind if we want it truly. But we must want it truly. So do you? Do you? And what does that mean? That's a good question too. Yeah. So let's examine that for a couple of minutes here. What we see here in the world is we're identifying with the ego, which is it's a mistake. It's a false idea about who we are, where we see ourselves as an individual human being cut off and separate, not only from God, but also from our brothers. We see them as brothers, plural, sisters, plural, as other people. We use plural nouns to delineate self and other. Yeah. Only in truth, there is no other. And we're awakening piece by piece, if need be, to that truth. And we've got this ego identification that wants us to continue to resist truth. And it offers us tiny little rewards. They're fun sometimes, like a gorgeous dinner and a bottle of wine, a tropical vacation, a weekend of feverish license in bed with your hot, sexy lover, things like that. You know, they don't last. What we find when we allow ourselves to look honestly at our experience is that the ego only offers us shabby and temporary rewards, even if we have a lot of income in this lifetime. Is that going to last forever? Of course not. Is a beautiful home going to last forever? Again, no. No, we have no choice but to see when we allow ourselves to look around and honestly take a look. Nothing in this world lasts. So the ego can really offer us nothing. What do we get for our continued allegiance to this? Suffering and decay, competition, strife, warfare, pitched battle, an F-bomb laced tirade, wrecks on the freeway, and death. Because this thing certainly doesn't last, does it? It does not. It cannot. But here's the happy news. It's not you. It's not you. You know this deep down. It doesn't make any difference whether you accept it or not. That's a whole completely different question. Certainly is, isn't it? But you know that deep down. There's something that draws each and every one of us to this collection of traditions, this collection of activities, prayers, whatever you want to call it. There's something that draws us to spiritual practice. And it speaks to us in many different forms. Sometimes you're just drawn and you don't know why because you cannot put it in words. Sometimes it's impossible to articulate. It might be a deep inner knowing or an intuitive hit or a feeling or just this sense that you've got that you should be watching this video straight through to the end, of course. You should be exploring this material. That's your inner teacher talking to you. We would all do well to recognize this and listen. Because our reality as spirit is completely unshakable. It's eternal. It's permanent. And here in the world, while we're on this thing called the spiritual path, we're using the mind to choose our reality as spirit in place of the illusions of the ego. In fact, anything that is not permanent is illusion. Another way of saying this, God is, period. What's implicit in that statement is that only God is. So we're invited to choose our reality as spirit or our continued round of pain and suffering as we see ourselves as an ego. The choice, the single choice that we have in the present moment between exactly two options. One's real, one's not. And you know which one we're invited to choose. And just because you run off and choose ego identification and battle and warfare and arguments, if you choose that right now, so be it. But when you recognize that you're carried off in that, you're invited to simply choose love right now, in the present moment. Choose love, choose God, choose the strength of Christ. We have this choice. And we're invited to use it. Because the ego, as we all deep down realize, ultimately offers us nothing. I mean, it might offer us a tropical vacation or a hot, sexy weekend in bed or a good job for a little while, a lot of money. What if your company gets bought out by another company and then you end up without that good job, right? Nothing in this world lasts. It doesn't. It doesn't. And we have a proclivity for running and hiding and pretending that it does, pretending that it's real, solid, our reality, and that it's always going to be there for us. Only we're deluding ourselves completely, aren't we? Because we know it's not. We're told here in this particular section of the text that love will enter into any mind that wants it truly, but we must want it truly. So do you? Do you want it truly? And what is love? That's a good question. God. That's my one-word answer. And what we're talking about here is love with a capital L. We're talking about love as it is, not as we'd have it be, but as it is, which is completely abstract. Love as we'd have it be here in the world is limited. Even our most beautiful marriages and intimate relationships are typically, although not always, but typically between exactly two people. what does that do? It excludes. It does. Even the most beautiful marriage is an ego device. I know. Yeah. Here's what we do with that. And by the way, I'm very happily married, and here in this dream lifetime, I aim to stay very happily married. Oh, yeah. Yeah, very happily. So, what do we do with this? I invite you to give your relationship over to your inner teacher. Let your inner teacher run the show. In my experience, that's led to even greater happiness and an even better, stronger connection. And of course, it's anathema to the ego. The ego says, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. Of course it does. But you don't have to listen to it. We're invited here on the path to turn over our entire experience to our inner teacher. And I hope that you may do that. We're allowing love to enter our mind. It's love in general. Capital L. But we must want it truly. Again, what we're referring to here as love is not what passes for love in the world. Those are what's known here in A Course in Miracles as special relationships, like a marriage, like a relationship between a parent and a child. And we, of course, are here to connect with and learn from those that are closest to us, aren't we? Our spouses, our kids, our immediate family, our really, really good friends. There are people that we're meant to spend sometimes this entire lifetime with because we're ready for each other. So give that relationship over to your inner teacher. Yeah, try it. Try it and see what happens, which is all we can do. Now, special relationships like a marriage, like a partnership, a business partnership, not something like that, a friendship that involve exactly two people or a small handful of people, that still doesn't involve everyone, does it? And can you invite everyone into your intimate relationship? Well, no, that's not what we're saying. That's not what's suggested here at all. It's give your special relationship over to the Holy Spirit. Give it over to Jesus or your inner teacher, whatever you call your inner teacher, by the way. You can call your inner teacher something else. We're invited to get out of our own way. And what more powerful way to do that than to step aside and let our inner teacher run the show? So do you want love? God, love, capital L, truly? That's a question that we should all ask ourselves. It goes to our motivation on the path, because at first when we start out, it's necessarily partial because there's still some attachment. There's still some sense of identity with a relationship, with a job, with this physical body. However you define and describe your identity, there's still, when we start out on the path, some attachment to that. We think it's us, and enter this course, which teaches us that no, it's not. So at the end of this passage of paragraphs, paragraph 6, we're in chapter 4, section 3 of the text, Love Without Conflict. There is reference here at the end of paragraph 6 to the very well-known saying, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Of course not. There is nothing else. Yeah. Jesus sees fit to mention this here. And, well, let's talk about it. Yeah, we're familiar, right, with the injunction, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Well, is that actually a helpful saying to you? There actually is nothing else. It doesn't mean that there are multiple gods. There's only God. No division, no separation of any kind. And by the way, you can call God whatever you want. You can call this whatever you wish to call it. It's just a name. Even the word God is simply a symbol. It's a collection of sounds. It's not the thing that it stands for. And by the way, God isn't a thing either, because a thing would imply that there are other things out there. Now, we're told here in the text of the course that God is fact. God simply is. There is nothing else. So if you're wondering about the existential question, who am I? You know, don't you? You truly do. I know that you know. Doesn't mean that you can't ask the question, nor does it mean that you have to accept the answer right away. You can choose to turn me off. Some people already have. Right? You can choose to run and hide. You can choose to deny who you really are. You could choose to do that for the remainder of this lifetime. And we all know people who do. You are interested in spirituality, so there is no question that there are people in your life that think you're nuts for so doing. It might be your own children or your spouse. Right? There's always someone that wonders why we're spending our time on this. Isn't there? Whatever. So be it. You can be one of those people if you want to. The theme here is you're not being coerced into anything. God doesn't coerce. God doesn't judge. God doesn't place blame. God doesn't set up hierarchical structures where one person has power over another. We have made that. And would it please you? Would it make you happy? Would it excite you to know that it's not real? None of this is. So if you're unsure what to do with that, ask your inner teacher for guidance. I repeat this on just about every video because I can't stress it enough. It's important. And we're invited here to want love truly. There is a workbook lesson that says, I want the peace of God. We're invited to want the peace of God and nothing else. When we do, guess what enters into our mind? Yep, exactly. All right. So thank you, as always, for joining me. And I appreciate all of your comments and questions. This can generate sometimes more questions than it does answers. That's what the spiritual path is like. So if you've got questions, please feel welcome to ask them. Not only will you get an answer from me, but there are other people all over the world that may be asking the same thing, and you will have helped them as well. And yeah, that's more than welcome. Here's the subscription button. I'd love to have you join me. It's the red arrow over here. And I will see you all again very soon. Thank you, as always, for joining me.